Good morning. Continuing our review of the conclusion of Hemshech Ayin Beis. Going through the essay that I wrote, we are on page 28, which is the new chapter 6. We finished chapter 5. And we can find the text if you want to follow it along at our Ayin Beis WhatsApp group. Okay. So let's review yesterday's previous class. So we're discussing, it's the conclusion of chapter 5 of the essay that discusses about Riyah, the power of seeing, not just hearing, meaning not just contemplating like Shema Yisrael, where we understand about God and we experience it, but all what we call the level of Shmiya, but it's like actually seeing it with your own eyes, which is of course a deeper level of divine experience. So you'll find in Chassidus a lot about Shmiya and Riyah, Shimon and Ruvain, and many other expressions, Shema Yisrael. But then sometimes it says, Ata Haresa Ladas. Haresa is Riyah. I have revealed myself. So Chassidus explains that Shmiya is one level of experiencing. In a way, it's more internal on your terms, but not so much the purity of the reality of the thing you're experiencing. Riyah may not be so internalized. It's more Mamayil Lamata, like we're learning, but it's very, very clear because it's coming straight, unfiltered. And at the end of the day, you want both qualities. Shmiya to internalize, Riyah to experience the highest levels of the divine. And that indeed is the difference between the Shema Yisrael of the neshama on its own, down below in a dark world. It can reach the level of Shmiya, and through Torah the Torah of which is Riyah, Hamashpili Lires, like I said, Ata Reis Ladas, earlier in Ayin Beis in volume 2 said that's Mamayil Lamata. V'yadaita yayin v'shavei levavecha k'Hashem olakim b'shamayim malva oros mitachas einoid. Doesn't say Riyah. That's from the bottom up. He explained. But Ata Haresa, you have revealed yourself for us to know you, is like a Matan Torah experience, and that's Torah and that provides that clarity, the light, the outside light that the neshama that illuminates the neshama, which in turn allows the neshama to be ignited and climb from the bottom up. So you have all the milas to the point that the neshama reaches all the way to its root in atzmus, which is that it itself can see, like the eye itself can see veinenu me'iris kishemesh kireach, and even higher, reaching atzmus, which is the source even of shemesh kireach and of the moyer and of oir and even of etzem koyach hariyah, higher than all of that. That's summing up a bit of chapter 5. And then the second half of chapter 5, which is part of what we learned in the previous class, and classes, let's just go over that, was that al pizeh, we can come and understand the difference between Siyur Adam of Neshamis and Siyur Adam of Torah. Because they both are called Adam. Siyur Adam of Neshamis is Mamata Lamayla. It's the Pedas Tachten, how you see the likeness of God through the lens from below. Meaning looking at, let's say, the human being, Mipsari Echzalakah, from my flesh I behold God. I discover and understand Chachma Vatzilus, Bina Vatzilus, or Chachma in general, the Esses Spheres, through my 10 faculties. I have Chachma within me. That was creating the image of the divine image of Chachma Lamaila. So Mamata Lamaila, we're developing an image of God. Obviously, God is beyond an image, but the way God manifests within the structure of Ishtalshus. Then there's the Tzir Adam Lamaila Lamata. That's how God looks at it. And that's Torah. So the Tzir Adam of Torah is looking at this structure, not from the bottom up, from our faculties we come to understand the 10 spheres, but actually how Elokus, which is higher than the 10 spheres, sees the 10 spheres. And that's from the top down. How he sees the structure he wants to create. So Torah sees existence through the lens of God. We see God through the lens of existence. And that's like the difference between Das Tachten and Das Elyon. And obviously, as we've learned, we want to join both of them ultimately, the both Yechudim. But that's the difference in those, the Sir Adam of Torah, the Sir Adam of Neshamas. That's one thing we learned in the last classes. Let me just continue on. Let me see what else. And that's like Yediyas Atzmi, Yediyah Kol HaNivroim. That's like Torah, Yediyas HaTorah. Bli Hester Uponim, right? From Tanya chapter 23. And Bapashtus Torah illuminates for us what does God want of existence. We can't come to that on our own. We come to a certain extent, we can come to the scientific understanding of existence. In other words, seeing the mind of God or the mind of the artist through the art. But to really understand God on his terms, what he wants, that requires a Torah. And that's where the Torah helps, through Amtsoyes HaTorah, it helps the neshama that comes down lamata to come through, to see through the darkness, and furthermore, to break actually the klippa of the nefesh, to break the concealment of the nefesh habamis, allowing the neshama to be revealed. Omnam, just concluding chapter 5 here. The Sefer Aveda, the end of the Aveda is that finally the power, the full potency and power of the neshama will be revealed. There's Riyah Atzmis, which is not just the Riyah as it is in the eye. Atzmis, which doesn't have the limit. It itself sees without any outside light, to the point that the neshama, the root of the neshama in Atzmus is revealed. L'chol levadecha, where you don't even need the shemesh l'eir elam. Hashem Himself is the source of light, higher than eir and moed, and due to that, the neshama actually can be mashpia back into Torah, because now the neshama is in its full glory, accessing and drawing down from the highest possible levels. And that's la'asud lave. Okay, and with that we concluded chapter 5. And as I wrote at the end, now we will come back to the yichud of tefillah and Torah, which is mamata lamayla, neshamas through tefillah, and Torah mamayla lamata in the next section, which is a big part of Ayin Beis, volume 2 through volume 3, talks about mamata lamayla on page 1350 in volume 3 till the end, and further, even with that which the Rebbe Rasham never concluded, is about mamayla lamata Torah. But clearly he would also get back to the yichud of both yichudim, as the Ayin Beis does actually conclude. So with that, I'm ready to continue the new chapter. We're middle of page 28. It says Perek Vav, middle of the page. We're going to continue now reading the essay. I'm happy to take any question about anything I just said before we continue, if you want to ask anything. Okay. So I see him Hemshech Terav Perek Vav, chapter 6 of 7 chapters. The Prakim HaKoidmim, in the earlier chapters, and I'm going to sum up all the chapters now in writing. Shel ha'or hazu of this essay, Hishtadalti l'shayer lefi aniyas daiti, I attempted to speculate, according to my humble opinion, Hasiyim shel Hemshech Terav, the conclusion of the Hemshech Ayin Beis, Shaloi Nistayim Ayidei Admonish V'Seiden. That was never concluded, was not concluded by the Rebbe Rashab. Kenira, as is obvious, Ma'ashaylas V'Anesim Shenishiru Be'emtza, from the questions and the themes, the topics that were left unanswered or unfinished, that were left in middle. As elaborated many times earlier in this essay, and we discussed it many times. So I'm just like summing up what I've been doing here in this essay. And how am I attempting to do this? Al pi hadrush, according to the Maimer, Mi kashem elkeinu amagbil sheves, the Maimer that's called Mi kashem elkeinu amagbil sheves shel admur hazoken, v'admur ha'amtzoi, of the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe, v'oid drushim, and other Maimerim like Veineinu Me'ires, and a few others that the Rebbe Rashab uses. So based on that, being Mishayer, speculating and trying to figure out what would be the conclusion of Ayin Beis. Sha'alov mevusas chelik choshev mesiyim hahemshech. This drush bika Hashem Elokeinu hamagbi. A big part, a chelik choshev, a primary part of this hemshech, of the end of the hemshech, is based on that. V'sham achein nimtzoin tshuvas u'biyurim, and there indeed, in that drush, we find answers and explanations l'shailas v'neisim elu, to these questions and themes that were not finished in Ayin Beis. And I sum it up now. So even though we've summed it up a number of times, I'm doing now in writing, and it can't hurt to go over it again. Ubeprotius, I'm going to sum up each of the previous 5 chapters before I move on in chapter 6 to the next topic. So let's just do this. I'll do it pretty quickly because it's something we've already learned. It's just a summation of the previous 5 chapters. Being it's a long essay, I thought it's helpful to sum it up. Perek Aleph of the essay, Skira Klolis V'Tamtzis HaHemshech. A general overview and a summation of the Hemshech Ayin Beis. Everything, from the beginning to the end. Second part of that essay, of chapter 1, is Tirus al Ashayla, the answer to the question on page 1466, Vamid Aleph Tav Samach Vov, Eich Yichel HaNeshama Lifla Bitl B'Nefesh Habamis. How could the neshama affect sublimation in the animal soul? An animal soul who itself on its own is fundamentally the exact opposite of bittul. It taketh hayeshes. V'habir, and what's the explanation briefly? Kefisha mavur bedrusha magbi, as explained in the Maimer HaMagbi, Asher al-yidei izbonus ha-neshama ner Hashem nismasodam, through the contemplation of the soul, which is the ner Hashem nishmasodam, the flame of Hashem, b'Hashem echad, b'parsha d'shena d'krishma, that contemplation, the divine unity in the first chapter in Shema, poil ha-nefesh al-ekis, the divine soul affects, which is the psila, the divine soul is compared to the wick. It affects shegam ha-seichel anushi v'ativi shel ha-nefesh habamis hashemen, that also the human and natural intelligence of the animal soul, which is the oil, yovin ha'achdus, should appreciate and understand this unity. Ad sheyovil yispilus ha'ava v'yichlal be'era ava, to the point that it gets excited with a love, to the point that it gets absorbed and dissolved, if you wish, encompassed within the love of Ava, the fire, which is the third element of the candle of the divine soul. And that's the meaning, to love God, that comes after Shema, with both sides of the heart. That was a summation of Perek Aleph, first chapter. Chapter 2, Perek Beis, discussed Koyach HaNeshama Mitzad Atzma. What is the power of the very soul itself, which is a Tirus al Ashayla b'Omer Hanal, which comes to answer the question, same above mentioned page. Why is it why is this ability to transform the animal soul the power of the soul, and how could the neshama poil that bittul in the nefesh habamis? And the second part of chapter 2 was ubir inyan ner mitzvah. What's the idea of the ner mitzvah, the candle of the mitzvah? Shagam bo yesh hagimel inyanim. It too has these 3 elements and components: the psila, the wick, shemen v'oil, the oil and the light. And then tirutz al hashayla sham ma'u inyan ner mitzvah ma hema gimel inyanim hanal. And there we have the answer to the question, the unanswered question in Ayin Beis. What is the union of Ner Mitzvah, and what are these 3 components in the Ner Mitzvah? Chapter 2. Chapter 3 of the essay, Bir Inyan V'Teira Er. What is V'Teira Er? Shu Hamshach is B'chinas Er Atzmi, Er Shalifni Atzimtzum U'Mayla Lamata. That's what chapter 3 discusses. What is Er Atzmi? The Teira is Er Atzmi, the Er before, the undiluted, unfiltered light before the tzimtzum, coming from Amshacha, from the top down. Perek Dalet, chapter 4, addresses Hashayches ben Ner Hashem Nishmasada v'Ner Mitzvah v'Terer. The relationship with these three elements of the soul's Ner, the flame of the soul, the flame of the mitzvah, or the candle of the soul, the candle of the mitzvah, and Terer, the light of Terer. Seder Aveda de Gimel on Yonim Elu, the process, the order of these three elements, and the quality that each one of them contributes in the picture. And the connection to the soul, to the divine soul's work, in the contemplation of Hashem Echad in Shema, and its impact and effect on the animal soul. That was chapter 4. And finally, chapter 5. Chapter 5, a summation of chapter 5 was Hashayches de Teira the B'chinas Hariyah, the connection of Teira to the level of vision, eyesight. L'umas Avedis HaNeshama Mitzadatzma B'chinas Shmiyah. In contrast to the Neshama's work on its own, which is the level of Shmiyah, Shema Yisrael, Shema. Ayidei Hamshachas B'chinas Hariyah Shal Teira B'Neshama Lamata. Through this level of vision, the visualization of godliness, of the that Torah provides and is mamshich and transmits into the neshama below, haneshama asma eila l'sharsha b'chinas atzmusi yizbarach. That helps. That allows the neshama to elevate to the core in atzmusi yizbarach, l'mayla min atera, higher than Torah, v'roya ba'asmei, and can see on its own, the soul that is, without support from other levels, it becomes the soul itself becomes like a moyer ve'neinu me'ires. Next page, 29. To the point that the neshama then is mashpiyah from atzmus into Torah and higher than this, Magim lemadrege shlishis latzmusei is baruch mamish. Reach to the third level. Tatzmusei shu amakil ulamayla gam mishemes riyareach ve'etzem koyach hariyah. It's the source and higher, even from the moyer of shemesh riyareach and even the etzem koyach hariyah. Lechol levadecha nachnu meidim. That you alone we acknowledge. That's why we don't have enough. Even if our eyes shine like the sun and the moon, we still don't have enough to acknowledge you, because there's something much higher than even me'iris kishemesh shekirech. K'mavur b'dibra maskil ve'neinu me'iris ladmun hazoken uladmun amsoi. Like explained in the Maimer ve'neinu me'iris that we cited and discussed of the Alter Rebbe and of the Mittler Rebbe. There you have a summary of the last 5 chapters. And now I'll continue to read. Again, if anybody has any questions, it shouldn't be any, because I really just summed up the 5 chapters, but if anybody has something you want to clarify, I'll pause here if you wish. Okay. Paragraph 2 now, in page 29. Al pi kol mashin is bar li'il, based on everything we've learned till now, meaning everything we discussed in the previous 5 chapters, Yuvan will be understood, will understand. So going back now to the very core and central theme of Ayin Beis. So all we discussed is all coming to explain the central theme of Ayin Beis. Hayichud elakus ve'elmus. The unification of God and existence. Or in the words I've used constantly, the interface between the divine and existence. And this interface takes place on 2 levels, or in 2 ways, 2 tracks, maybe is the right word. One is, the union that is achieved through prayer from the bottom up, Hamavur b'chelik beis shel hahemshech. That's explained in the second volume, beginning in the second volume, from chapter 384, page 790 and on. And the second track, by Yichud Mamayla Lamata, unification that happens from the top down, be'ikra yedei Torah, primarily through Torah. Hamavur b'chelik gimel shel hahemshech. That's explained in the third volume, from page 1350 and on. So all that we've learned is all coming to explain all of that. This yichud and the two manners of this, of the two oifanim, the two tracks of yichud, mamat l'mayla, mamayla l'mata. Ata nevayir. Now we will explain, and I'm continuing in the essay. Beprot yiseiser hahevdel ben shnei oifanim shel elu. This should say elu, not shaloi. Now we'll explain in detail the difference, in more detail, I should say, the difference between these two tracks. The work and the union achieved from the bottom up, and the union and work and union achieved from the top down. What is the quality? What does each one contribute that the other doesn't have? And then the joining of both of them together. Because remember, each one has their own Aveda. Clearly. Tefillah is not Torah, Torah is not Tefillah. But then, they join together and complement each other and creates a higher unity that's even higher than each one separately. The third union, the union of these two unions. V'gam, and we will also address Yeser Bir, further explanation, Ba'kesher hatlas kivuni, in the triangle connection, Bein neshamas ner Hashem, between souls, the flame of God, the candle of God, V'avedosa b'tfilah mamat l'mayla, and their work in davening, tefillah from the bottom up, Torah mamayla l'mata, which is from the top down, v'ner mitzvah, as we will learn, chibur shneim yachad, which joins mamat l'mayla and mamayla l'mata. So what we'll also discuss is, number one, like I said, more details about these two different tracks, the quality each one has and joining together, as well as more explanation in the triangle of the connection of neshamas, Torah, and mitzvahs. Eichem mashlimim zeh zeh, how they complement each other. The eich kol echad meisiv b'asheni, and how each one adds to the other. B'mili tachlis habriya, in the realization and fulfillment of the purpose of creation. So that's what we're going to be going into now, to further detail and further explanation in what I've just described here. The kol zeh miyusad, and all this is based upon, move on and understood, al pi hamavur b'drusha magbi l'sheves shel admur hazokim v'admur hamsoi, according to what is explained in the Maimer Magbi l'sheves, back to that Maimer of the Alter Rebbe and of the Mittler Rebbe. Okay. So that's laying a little introduction, the groundwork for what we're going to be discussing now in this upcoming chapter 6 of the essay. Anyone wants to ask something or comment?
Okay. Yes, I just wanted to clarify how you translated hatlat kivune bein, these three things. You called it hatlat kivune, but you called it like a triangle. But what were you?
Yeah.
What is the middle?
Is three. There's a three-pronged, three-pronged connection between the shamas, Torah, and mitzvahs.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So let's continue. But Perek Shinayin Ches Shel Hemshech. So I'm going. This is explanation. I'm bringing in ideas that come from earlier in Ayin Beis to help understand all of this. This further interconnects and interweaves the themes of Ayin Beis, as you shall see. In chapter 378, this is going back a long time. This is volume 1. in the Hemshech, page 776. And keep in mind, the pages here are the early edition of Ayin Beis, not the latest one with the footnotes. The 3-volume one is what I'm referring to. Mavur HaHefresh, there in that chapter 378, it's explained the difference between Ha'olam U'mata L'maylo. Actually, Shinai Ches may be volume 2. I think it's volume 2. I'm not positive. 1 second. Yeah, it's volume 2. It explains the difference between the elevation from the bottom up, v'hamshachim l'mayla lamata, and the transmission from the top down. Beis hapirushim b'arimim chelikai hamelech. The two explanations in arimim chelikai hamelech. Remember, there's the pirush arimim chelikai hamelech. From the bottom up, you elevate elikai hamelech to reimamus, lifting it up to keser. And the second is arimimcha, you be mamshich from reimamus, from keser into elikai hamelech, elikus that manifests within existence. And he explains the quality of each one of them. So we don't have to speculate that. It specifically spells it out, and we're going to actually read the language of the Rebbe Rashab now. This is from page, as you'll see at the end of this next paragraph, I'm quoting the Rebbe Rashab from page 779, that chapter 378. So here's what the Rebbe Rashab says. This is about Mamat L'mayla Mamay L'mata. Hini Yadua, now it's known, Klolos HaHefresh B'Mamat L'mayla Mamay L'mata. What is the general difference between when you do something from the bottom up or you do it from the top down? The Mamat L'mayla Hu Aidei HaChonas Klei HaMakabel. When it's come the bottom up, it's through the Klei HaMakabel. The container of the recipient is primed, and it's achana, it prepares the ground to draw down the oir. If you remember earlier, we spoke about the oir lefi hakeli. There's the oir from a mile lamata, which we'll soon discuss, where the keli is shaped by the oir. Here, the keli is shaping there. It's like the student coming to the teacher and saying, please, teach me about this and this subject. So it's the keli that's drawing the light. The achonis klei makabel. That's mamata l'mayla. Halos man. That's when the Kabbalah and Chassidus calls halos man. The elevation maya nukfin means literally the female, the feminine waters, like malchus. Asrusa dilatata in the language of Chassidus and for Zohar, that the awakening is coming from below, from the achana. The klei makabel is the one that is initiating, and it is drawing down the hamshach. V'nimshach oir sheba, and what kind of oir does it draw down? Because it's lefi ayedei achanas klei makabel. So the oir that's sheba ayedei tzimtzum shetoli b'achanas hakeli. So obviously the oir is going to come in a tzimtzum dika way, in a diminished way, because it's dependent on the keli. Excuse me. Because the keli, just even think physically. If you have a cup and you have a big barrel of liquid, of wine, of whatever it is, and you're coming to draw from that big barrel or large reservoir, it's going to be, and it's fi'achanas keli. The keli determines how much is going to be drawn. If the barrel just starts pouring, it'll spill over and the whole thing will be overwhelmed. So it's the case. So it comes in that simsum dika way. Shetoli b'achanas hakeli. That's mamata l'mayla. U'mamayla l'mata, from the top down, guamshachas er atzmi. Now we're not talking about a mitzumtzim dika. The er atzmi, the very core energy. She'ushaloi lefi erech hachanas klei makabel. So you see two differences. The first one, there's achanas klei makabel and the oir is mitzumtzum. So there's the keli, that's one element. The keli is the one that's doing it, is initiating, and the oir is a limited one. Here, it's a oir atzmi, not mitzumtzum, and it's not due to the achana of the klei makabel. It's not. That's not being initiated by the keli. It's coming from the top down. V'hamoshel yedua, and the Rebbe Rashab brings an example. I believe this is an example from the Alter Rebbe, and Alter Rebbe is my monim. But the Rebbe Rashab cites it. This is what he says. Think of two people. One is standing on a mountain, on a hill, and one is standing in a bika, in a valley or on a plateau, in a field. So one is above and one is below. Yala, and they want to meet. They want to join. So how do they do that? So he says, in order for the lower one, Yala, to elevate, to go up, to ascend, Sorichli is Bal Koyach Be'etzem. He needs to have strength. He has to fundamentally have the strength. Ba'aveda Tama, Ba'ava V'yira, Shein Rotzi V'shuv. Aveda Tam means a complete Aveda, with love and reverence, which is Rotzi and Shuv. Love and reverence refer to the two type of Avedis. One is yearning upward, one is drawing down. Not relevant to the discussion here. So that's the first thing, because how is he going to climb a mountain if he has no strength? How's he going to go up? So that's the first thing. He needs to have koyach, his koyach hatachta. Second thing, uleida, and he has to know hadrochim v'nesivis. He needs to know the paths and the pathways. Hein darkei aveda amitim. Because to get up, you need to know how to travel. It's not just, especially if you're climbing. In Aveda, that means you have to know the right paths of how to do the Aveda amitim, the proper derech Aveda. There are many ways to do Aveda, and at what pace, and so on. Ubirur v'zichur chachumni is the nefesh habamis. And another thing, there's a third thing. He's not saying it in numbers. I'm just enumerating how this is like actually different things. And he needs the refinement of the crassness of the animal soul. Ulevushim the machshava dibiramaisa shaydezehu eila. If, for example, he's very overloaded with whatever he's carrying and heavy garments, it's not going to be easy for him to climb. So he explains, this is summarized, but more at length explains there that the fact is that in order for it to do, he has to be mavar the chumris of nefesh habamis, or else he won't be able to climb. The nefesh habamis will weigh him down. And the levushim, and the nimshal is the garments of thought, speech, and action, that they have to be more refined, that allow him to elevate, or else he'll just be grounded by the gravitational pull of the animal soul and its interests. So all these are the conditions necessary to go from a mata lamaila. To sum up, strength, to know the path of Aveda, the paths, ways, and to get rid of any extra impediments that don't let you climb properly. And after all of this, this is the achonis klei makabel. That means how the makabel becomes a keli for oyer. Because if you don't do these three things, you're not going to climb anywhere. To put it simply, if you live in this world and you just follow your daily routines, so the nefesh habamis has its interests, you'll be grounded. Why would you climb? You'll be dealing with all your existential needs and interests, which is basically looking down on earth in the materialism that defines our lives. So to climb, you need to have strength, meaning a will and strength to move and climb. You need to have know what pathway to take, and you need also to eliminate or weaken, let's say, unload yourself from the material concerns that weigh you down. And even after all that, how far can you climb? You can only climb as far as you're able to, because every human being is limited. So you only can climb to the sheirish shemakar of your capacity, your root and source. Like the Ovis before Matan Torah, they didn't have the power of mitzvahs and Torah that were given on Matan Torah, so they were able to reach high levels, but only as much as what's called a chassidus sheirish hanivroim. They could only go as far as their power allowed them to go. Matan Torah provided a whole new power, which is Hashem Almayla Lamata Torah mitzvahs, that allows Yidden to go even higher. This doesn't diminish the Ovis because they did it on their own. but it tells you how high they went. Beruchnius. And another point, ukafi ha'aveda, and everything is commensurate to the klei ha'mekabel. According to the aveda v'hazichuch and the refinement, kachu hamshacha. The hamshacha sa'ir is not oir atzmi necessarily. It's only the oir that you can muster up with your strength to draw down. Like I said before, the mekabel determines, based on its effort and its initiative, and that will draw down the energy, and commensurate to your effort will be what you receive. That's pure mamata lamaila, without any. We're not talking now without any extra support or extra or strength that comes from above. Aval mamaila lamata, says the Rebbe Rashab, but going from the top down works very differently. Hu amshachas atzmos ein sof. There it's amshach of atzmos ein sof. That's what happened by Matan Torah. Ach atzmos ein sof. But here, atzmos ein sof, ein b'chinas halos man. That's not in the category of the effort from below, of Maya Nukfim, of the Aveda Mamata Lamaila. Rak b'chefetz ha'atzmus. That's completely dependent on God's desire, what He wishes. Because it's not dependent on the Aveda of the person below. This is from the above going down. Ushaloi lefiyarach ha'keli. And it's not commensurate to the keli, to the container. V'zeu hamshacha de Matan Torah. And this is the hamshacha that happened by Matan Torah. At kan l'shenei. This was exact language of the Rebbe Rashab, b'hakitzur sham. Remember, that part of Ayin Beis, the Rebbe Rashab was still writing summaries for each chapter. So the chapter 378, this is a summary of that chapter, which is page 779 in Ayin Beis, volume 2. So what he laid out here was a very clear distinction, mamata l'mayla, mamayla l'mata, the difference between them. Then we're going to continue now reading further. Let me see here. I started a little late, so I'll go a little more. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. As far as the kalim, I understand that how kalim can draw down the light, but creating a light, I'm not so sure how that happens. Drawing down, I get it. Obviously, you're drawing down elikos and all that.
But you never heard of mida keneged mida? When you do something, God reciprocates.
But that's not creation of a light.
Why not?
The light
Why
already
is it not
exists.
creating?
That means the light already exists. You're drawing
Not
down what Hashem is giving you.
Not necessarily. You do tzedakah with someone, and a new tzedakah comes from above. Who said it exists?
What about the pasuk? Or chadash al tziyam ta'ir. Let me speak to Maher al-Oro. That's a new light.
Sometimes it's new, sometimes it's not new. Rosh Hashanah is a new light. I mean, it can be both. It can be, there are times it reveals something. Bracha reveals. Tefillah is mamshech yehi ratzna, ratzah chadash. It's a whole discussion. It can be either way. Not really relevant to this discussion here, but you have both options, both possibilities.
In general, you have Isrusu de latata leads to Isrusu de la'ela. Are we talking about a new light or a hamshacha?
But he's not talking about that right now. I mean, he is talking about that, sorry. But a commensurate, yeah. As when you, an inspiration from, when you initiate below, there's a response from above. Like
right.
Cause and effect, yes. Call and response. It's like
totally
when you daven. You daven and Hashem responds.
Right. My question related to George's question is whether that you're drawing down a new light or just a light from a world above a Sia.
You could be both, either one.
Okay.
You may recall we talked about bracha and tefillah. Bracha generally reveals. Tefillah can draw something new, a ratzon chadash. Like if a person's, God forbid, sick in a hospital and the decree is that he may not live, you could actually create a new hamshacha that would give him life.
Beautiful. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, but it's really not relevant per se to the discussion here. Just two different ways of the hamshacha.
Basic chassidus, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, now Next paragraph. Ubehemshech ha'inyan, this continuing, summarizing the Rebbe Rashab back in volume 2, the continuation of this subject matter, Prakim Shinpei Aleph Shinpei Gimel, in pages 381, chapters 381. Just one second. Yeah. 381 through 383, which are pages 785 and on there. Mevayed, he explains in the continuation, basically this is like the ongoing discussion, Shebezin Yonim Elu, that these two tracks, we'll call them, the Halal Mamata Lamaila, where from coming down from one below, elevating from bottom up, and transmitting from the top down, he explains this is the difference between prayer, tefillah, and Torah. Davening is an elevation from the bottom up in an orderly progression, step by step. Tefillah compared to a ladder, the dream of Yaakov, a ladder that's standing on the ground and the top of the ladder is reaching into heaven. So there you see, what's a ladder? It's a climbing from step by step, rung by rung, going upward in an orderly fashion. You only go rung by rung, you don't jump. The beginning of tefillah starts with hidah, which is haidu, LaHashem. We start with haidu in Psukkah de Zimra. Before that we say moidani, but he's starting from haidu, haidah, va'achakach, Psukkah de Zimra. As we climb the ladder, next is Psukkah de Zimra in the order of prayer. Birchas Krishma, the blessings before Shema, the Krishma, and then Shema. V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha, which after Shema comes loving Hashem. Shepoyel bitl gam ba'nefesh habamis. So he's actually referring to what we've learned, that it affects bitl, a sublimation, of the animal soul, b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha, with both sides of the heart. V'teirahi shenitnu mamaylo, that's tefillah. Then comes Torah, is given from above. Tefillah is not tefillah is initiated from below. We're praying and we climb step by step. Haidah, haidu, Psukkah de Zimra, Birchas Shema, etc. And Torah is given to us from the top down. Hamshachem Amaylamata. That the day Vav Sivan, when Hashem, or Zayin Sivan, Hashem, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, Moshe came up on the mountain and Hashem gave him a Torah Mamaylamata. And in general, that's what Torah is. It's Hamshachem from Hashem to us. Okay. So now you see, we're filling in pieces here. This whole Hemshech, things we've learned in volume 3, things we've discussed earlier, but it's connecting now back all the way to the beginning, where the Rebbe Rashab Taka begins. Remember I said in volume 2 he begins Mamata Lamaila. This is where he begins it. So I've been referring to it many times, where Mamata Lamaila Tefillah starts in the middle of volume 2, goes till the middle of volume 3, and then Torah starts in the middle of volume 3. So now you're seeing somewhat the lay of the land where it is actually in Ayin Beis. But there's more. There's more. Uba Perek Shin Pei Dalet, continuing on later in the chapter 384. So we've already covered, you see, chapter 378, now 381 through 83. Now in chapter 384, page 790, he says like this. He starts explaining the general difference between tefillah and Torah, between prayer and Torah, between tefillah and Torah. Maschil there, he begins arichus habir, a lengthy explanation be'inyan haveda mamata lamayla al yidei tefillah. What exactly constitutes this aveda from the bottom up of davening, tefillah. And how does he explain it? Al Piteres Harav HaMagid. The Magid of Mezrich, who was, of course, the great student of the Baal Shem Tov, and became the second Nasi of Chassidus, in turn the teacher of the Alter Rebbe, who was the founder of Chassidus Chabad. So there's a famous Torah of the Magid. It goes like this, Al HaPosuk, and you will recall it, I hope, because it was a big part of volume 2, but we referred to it many times. So the Magid has a Torah on the Posuk, Aseh lecha shtei chatzetzos. The Posuk in Parsha Ba'alescha, where it says, you shall craft 2 trumpets. But the word for trumpets used in the Torah is chatzetzos. And the Magid teaches chatzetzos comes from 2 words, chatzi tzura. Chatzetzos, chatzi tzuras. 2 halves of 1 image. So now he's bringing the idea of an image. Remember tzura? The tzuras ha'adam of Torah, the tzuras ha'adam of neshamis. So it's all connected. So what does he say? Hayichud d'shtei chatzi tzuras. That the chatzetzos represent the union of 2 half images. And he explains 1 half image is the neshama, created b'tzelem Elokim, and the other half image is the divine part. And they join together. Ubir zeh, and this explanation in Ayin Beis, look at this. Nimshach continues for 559 pages. Those are the 559 pages I keep referring to. The Aveda Mamat L'mayla from volume 2 in Ayin Beis through volume 3. At Seif Amud Aleph Shinman Tes goes all the way to the end of page 1349. Bechele Gimel Shel Hemshach, in the 3rd volume of Hemshach Ayin Beis. Ubet Amud Aleph Shin Nun, and then in middle of volume 3, on page 1350, Maschil Levayer Inyan Hatera Shu Amshachem Amayl Lamata. He begins to explain what is Torah, which is the Amshacha, the transmission from the top down. And exactly this is the language of the Rebbe Rashab on page 1350, you may recall. Uma'ata, quote, Uma'ata tzarech lahaven inyan ha'teira shi b'chinus hamshacham amayla lamata. That ma'ata, from now on and now, will explain the hamshacham of the teira amayla lamata after the 559 pages that we explained, tefillah mamata lamayla. So here you see the whole theme of Ayin Beis coming together, and we're talking about literally close to, I would say, 700 pages of Ayin Beis. Half of Ayin Beis is dedicated to this. 59 pages to tefillah, primarily tefillah. There's plenty more material there, obviously. And then from 1350 till 1470, what is that? Another 120 pages, 20-some pages, when Hemshech Ayin Beis concludes. But we understand it would have continued on. I can't know how long, but at least, based on what I'm guessing here and speculating, at least 30, 40 more pages, maybe even more. That would have been the second half of Torah. And the 700 pages earlier, from volume 1 through volume 2, are all part of the story, which I'm not going to get into right now. I'll talk about it a little later, especially later in this essay. I connected back to the beginning of Ayin Beis. But right now, we're tying Ayin Beis, what we've learned, all the way back to the middle of volume 2. Like I just said, we began all this in chapter 378, page 776 in the Hemshech, going all the way to the end. Okay. And I think here I'll stop. Because then we're going to continue now further understanding what exactly is the difference between Tefillah and Torah, and we're going to sum that up and then bring it back to the themes we've been discussing in the previous chapters of this essay. So you'll see it all come together very nicely, I believe. I'm going to stop here. Are there any questions? Everybody following the storyline here?
Yeah, very smooth, very logical, in my opinion.
Okay, good. That's the key. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
I mean, if people have been listening carefully to you, I mean, this is not only a summary of Ayin Beis, but a summary of what we've done so far. Not exactly, but in the Chazara, well, in your essay, but your essay, of course, goes into much more detail about these two forms of avoda through the lens, if you will, of the lamp when it's three components, among other things. Would you say that's true?
Can you repeat that? That this is
I'm
all
just
through the lens of the three components of the candle?
No, I'm saying that the candle, Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, is, I mean, that's a votive from Lamata Lamaila, in a sense. Starts with prayer. Shema is what helps you do that. And then the avoda, and then we explained Ner Mitzvah, and then we talked about Torah or. So, I mean, the
Yeah, but
Ner
that's all.
plays.
Yeah, but that's introduced later. I would say that is a more of a detail in the bigger picture of first mamata lamayla tefillah, mamay lamata teira, and then he introduces ner Hashem nishmas and ner mitzvah terer. So yes, it's all bound together, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go in either direction. The order of Ayin Beis first is what we've been learning right now, which is the matla maila and then mamay lamata. And then, in understanding that, he introduces the Maimer Magbil Shevis, where we get into Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam and Ner Mitzvah and Terer. I'm not sure if that's what you were asking.
Basically, yeah.
Okay. Good. So I'm going to stop here. We're on page 29. Also, page 29. And a lot of this has been a review of what we've discussed till now, and now entering back into the bigger themes of Ayin Beis. And we're going to continue in discussing comparison of Torah and Tefillah. Then, of course, we have to bring in mitzvah, discuss all those three, and the quality of each one of them, and how it all ties together, which we shall continue doing in the next classes. So I'm going to